Tumbletown has had its fair share of adversaries, shall we say. We've got evidence of a bit of that down here. Whip's warden prank, as yet uncovered at the time of this recording. We've had people stealing TNT, we've had people leaving some fairly oblique Toy Story references. I think Tumbletown needs another adversary, but maybe not one that's going along the same lines as some of this stuff, because, of course, the sheriff's got to round up some outlaws every now and again. And I've had this idea in mind for a while. Basically, ever since Jimmy decided he was going to be the sheriff, I kind of thought, we need some bandits for the sheriff to round up. I think that's going to be a fun thing to do. And I also want to tie it into something that Jimmy can do to export goods from this area, because he sat on a pretty substantial resource. He's obviously gone the gunpowder route, he's got the creeper farm, which, yes, I still need to do something to improve the output of a little bit. He's got himself the TNT wagon, and there's a lot of other stuff around here that he could trade. Notably, the terracotta. I think a lot of people need terracotta throughout a Minecraft season. Obviously, glazed terracotta is something that I've been playing around with here and there, but I've mostly been trading that in odds and ends from villagers, from stonemasons specifically. But I think Jimmy could do pretty well by exporting terracotta. If we take a look at some of the chests, he's got a fair amount of it just kind of lying around. But one of the big things about living in a mesa is wanting to preserve the landscape and not mine out all of the terracotta from your surroundings. Luckily, in Minecraft 1.19, we have the opportunity to make renewable clay, and renewable clay can then be turned into terracotta. So I have this idea that I've wanted to play around with, where a bunch of bandits have decided to take things into their own hands. They reckon the sheriff isn't really moving forward with the idea of selling terracotta out of this mesa, so they're gonna do it themselves. And so this is gonna be half prank and half lore build, basically. I want the sheriff to discover a bandit camp on the outside of town that has been bootlegging terracotta and selling it as maybe an original product of the Tumbletown Mesa. I might even set up a shop for them in Tumbletown and see if Jimmy notices. See how long it takes Jimmy to cotton on to the fact that people are selling stuff out of there. And honestly, if some of the other members of the server come by and buy terracotta and like leave a review or something like that, I think that's going to be absolutely brilliant. So out here on the outskirts of the mesa, in some of the like ruined mesa, the eroded badlands kind of area. I love this area. I always like these biomes. They look fantastic. And I want to set up a bandit camp hidden out here, but not hidden too well, so that Jimmy can find it, raid the place, and discover how they've been making all this terracotta. And is this? I think that is a naturally generated block of red sandstone. Sorry for the diversion, but that is honestly the only time you ever see red sandstone naturally generating in a mesa, instead of it just being red sand and then orange terracotta from there on down. That is kind of wild if that's the case. But this little narrow gap in the terrain here could be a perfect place to start a bandit hideout. I've got a bunch of reference images that I want to work from. I've got a bunch of really neat ideas for this place. But we're going to have them have a machine in the back, which is bootlegging terracotta. It's turning a bunch of dirt into mud, turning the mud into clay, turning the clay into terracotta via a system of furnaces. And that's something Jimmy can continue to use once he's cleared out this place of bandits. This cave goes a little bit further down, but I think somewhere around here we'll set up a custom abandoned mineshaft kind of vibe, except it's going to lead in some different places to how a regular abandoned mineshaft would, and probably make it out of some different materials, so it's plainly obvious that it's not one that's naturally generated as part of the mesa. I've got a lot of digging to do, so let's get to it. Okay, it's still a little rough around the edges, but progress has been made. This mine entrance here is going to be slightly better disguised, but is probably going to have a couple of elements outside to draw Jimmy in. And once he's in here, he'll notice this fairly natural cave dips down into a kind of mineshaft layer right here. There's a couple of blocked off areas where stone has fallen in, a little bit of gold mining has taken place, but the real meat of the operation really starts to make itself known down here. And we're going to have a couple of surprises for him in these alcoves here and there, but then it's going to open out into this more natural ravine. Still working on whether or not I'm going to either light up or block off that top area to make sure that creepers don't drop in on here at some point. But there's a natural waterfall. I kind of engineered some of this myself, but the spring was already here. leading down into this area that's full of mud. And there are shelves, weirdly. I kind of like the fact that we've got some mangrove wood, stripped mangrove logs there up there as toppers for these poles. But basically, he's going to come in here, notice that there are shelves and that mud seems to be stacked up, a couple of barrels, composters, what's going on in this operation? And then he gets around to the other side here, and here is where things get a little more technical. I want to try and get him into this space with this barrel, but this whole thing is going to have a stone floor, and I was trying to figure out ways of making sure that he actually steps into this space before he opens the barrel, and I figured having these stairs here and having him hop over the stairs might work, because when he opens this barrel, either via skulk sensor or a slightly easier mechanism via observer, that's going to activate an elevator, kind of similar to one I built in the survival guide a little while ago in a similar mineshaft setup. The slime block elevator is going to take him all the way down to this level, which is where I'm currently working. This is going to be a lot broader. I've been looking at the caves around this and thinking I might have to squeeze this in. Either that or it opens out into a much larger cave and there's potential for him to get lost. But I want this to feel like a bit more of an organized operation because it's going to be run by pillagers. I want to have a bunch of guys down here with crossbows, effectively looking like they are loading carts or pallets or something up with clay, and they are waiting for him. So as soon as he comes down here, the pillagers are all going to train their crossbows on him. It becomes a bit of a fight, and he has to go around either taking out the pillagers one by one with a sword or shooting at them with a bow, whatever Jimmy has on hand. And the tricky thing about this is I want at least one of the pillagers to be a pillager raid captain. He's going to have a banner, because the banner is going to be pretty crucial to another element of this that is going to unlock the secrets of their whole Terracotta bootlegging operation. But right now I'm on the phase where I need to put in this slime block elevator, and of course I need to make sure that the blocks along the sides are not pullable by slime blocks. So that's why this whole thing is a giant column of barrels, which I think look really good actually. They kind of look like tracks that the elevator is following down here. But the other options there include things like droppers, furnaces, fairly straightforward and cheap things to get hold of in large quantities. And also, considering the nature of the operation down here, we could end up using some glazed terracotta, which can be pushed by pistons but not pulled, which makes it ideal for use around slime block contraptions. The grindstones won't be affected since they've got a GUI, they're a workstation, they don't end up getting pushed or pulled, and there's also a lot of them in this column, but they won't connect to the slime blocks anyway. I just love the way they look like a chain bringing the lift up and down here. But whatever we end up using, I've still got a lot more to do, so I'm going to cut away once more and I'll see you folks on the other side. And now, with a bit of redstone in place, this is working really well. So we have an elevator platform inside of here, disguised, so nobody knows this is an elevator platform. But when we open up this barrel, it actually turns into an elevator, and you can see some of the mechanism, but it's pretty compact in here, so hopefully nothing should glitch out, Jimmy won't end up falling through. This leads us down to this area where the pillagers have clearly been digging tunnels, but there is this trail of mud that leads to and from the elevator platform over here, suggesting that maybe some muddy substances have been moved around down here. Still working on a few of the details, still got to dress things up a little bit. I quite like this mine shaft with sort of two corridors going on, and I'll try and maybe work in some more details like that around here. A little bit more gold being mined. But over here on the left-hand side, there's going to be a barrel with a sign above it saying bosses only, prove you're the boss. There'll be an iron door right here, which is meant to imply that Jimmy can't get in right away, although, if he's got a pickaxe with him, he could break the door down, but honestly, I think it's a little bit more fun if he tries to follow this puzzle. So to prove he's the boss, he's going to have to put a specific item inside of here. And what specific items do pillagers have? Well, the answer to that is, of course, those ominous banners that the pillager captains carry around. The idea being that once we get some pillager captains down here, he'll have to kill the ones with the banners, drop the banner into that barrel, and only then will the door open, permanently letting him through. Any other items that he drops in here, if he just puts like a lever or something in here, that's just going to get swept away into a different chest and is not going to fill up the hopper. It's not going to be filtered by the item filter. It's just going to go into a separate chest that's going to contain anything else that he tries to throw in there. So the majority of the pillagers are going to be contained in this room, where I've borrowed a trick from B00, who pointed out in one of his recent Hermitcraft episodes that if you put pointed dripstone underneath any block, as long as it can stick to the underside of the block, any of the mud on top of it will still dry out and turn into clay, which means you can use stairs and slabs and really create an interesting idea here. He used campfires a whole bunch. There's meant to be heat in here. It should almost feel like a sauna, and it's like drying out the mud as it goes and turning it all into clay. Obviously, underneath all of this, we'll need to put some pointed dripstone, and that's where I run into the issue of there being a cave directly underneath this, but don't worry, I'll try and put in an extra layer so that we can have the pointed dripstone under here. And of course, the impression we should try and give is that once all of the clay has dried out on here, once all of the mud has dried and turned into clay, it can be put in this machine here where we'll have a couple of chest minecarts, one there providing fuel, and one up there sending all of the clay into these furnaces to be smelted into terracotta, which will all end up in this output chest over here. So this is still a fully functional auto smelter that Jimmy could come back down here and use if he wanted to. You'll also notice on the other side of the room we have this little minecart rail here, and this is going to be full of mud, with the idea that the mud is being sent over from that room over there, and that once again leads Jimmy back into the room that you can only access if you've got the boss's key. Inside of here, I'm going to build the mud factory that I built over at the ancient capital. We're going to have effectively the same machine. Once I've set that machine up, it's going to be pretty obvious that the rail over there is meant to feed mud down into this room where it can be dried out over the campfires. And the fun part about using rails basically everywhere is that hopefully the pillagers won't decide to cross this rail once they're in here, because mobs have difficulty pathfinding over rails. I've already had a couple of mobs spawn in here. Once I walked out into the corridor, they wouldn't follow me out there, so I'm hoping that the same is going to be true of the pillagers. They like to stay at range anyway, so once we've broken line of sight with them, hopefully they'll just mill about in this room, and we won't end up with the same issue that we had with the skeletons in Joey Graceffa's pirate fort, where they all just walked out to the front of the build and none of them were distributed around the rest of the base. So my next task is to open this out large enough that we can set up the dirt to mud factory inside of here, and then we're going to work on an item filter circuit that's going to make sure only a pillager's ominous banner is going to allow Jimmy into this room. Beyond that, it's really just a matter of getting the set dressing right, and I think we can do that pretty easily. This is a much smaller build than the pirate skull fort was, so I think I'm going to be able to get it complete in a fraction of the time. Anyway, I've got a bit of redstone to do, so wish me luck, and I'll see you folks on the other side. So a short time later, we have one mud-making machine in place, and it's pretty consistent for the most part. Skips a block occasionally, but they do seem to do that. I think it's something to do with the timing of the dispensers sometimes. Sometimes this dispenser fires before the block gets fully pushed in front, I think, and so it ends up accumulating water bottles in here instead of converting one dirt block every so often. But as long as you're fairly precise and right-click frequently instead of just holding down the right-click button, it doesn't end up malfunctioning all that often. And so I think one of the things I'm going to do is leave a written book around here with instructions for the operation of the machine. And that kind of makes sense in-world as well, because this is being operated by pillagers who I'm fairly certain are not the brightest. So it kind of makes sense to me to have a book that says, hey, idiot, just place them one at a time instead of just spamming them in like this, because, yeah, that's how the machine is going to break more frequently. But the length of this room is also the push limit of the pistons, which should make sure that it doesn't displace the rail track over here. And the rail track is now actually functional in transporting stuff between these two rooms. I think there's a witch under that bridge right now, but if we end up pressing the button here, it'll send this minecart off towards the other room, and we can load it up with mud to be sent through into the drying room. We'll throw a couple of stacks of mud into this minecart chest, we'll hit the button there, and that will send it off on its way. Thanks to a bit of a boost in the tunnel there, it ends up in the drying room, and we can place it out to dry on these racks, which I still need to put the pointed dripstone underneath, but you get the idea. And if we're going to move pillagers in here relatively soon, I do want to make sure those campfires are covered so the pillagers don't just jump on top of them, because it would be kind of embarrassing if he's meant to throw a pillager banner into that barrel and it turns out that the pillager banners aren't even available because the pillager captains have killed themselves on campfires and then despawned. And to that end, we are actually going to decorate this area with a couple of ominous banners, just to make sure that Jimmy has a backup in here in case the pillager captains get killed and he destroys the banners or something like that, but also so that it kind of artfully conceals the mechanism for this auto furnace. We will still need one for the item filter in here, but thankfully there is a pillager outpost very close by in the desert right next to Jimmy's mesa, so I think that's how we're going to get our pillager captains and the other troops down here. But in the meantime, I need to make a little bit more mud just so we can have some examples lying around for when Jimmy comes down here, and so that those drying pallets can be absolutely loaded with mud turning into clay. The dripstone is now in, and the clay has actually actually dried out pretty quickly. There's only a couple of mud blocks still left here waiting to dry out, so I might actually swap all of this clay for mud before I leave, or I don't know, maybe we can figure out some other way of keeping the clay as mud for the most part here. Maybe might even remove a couple of the pieces of dripstone so it looks like some of them still haven't dried yet. But either way, that's all working fine, and Jimmy can continue to use that afterwards if he wants to. We're going to remove this button right here because the mechanism for the filter is now in place as well. If we throw any old items into here to try and prove that we're the boss, you know, book and quill, bits of stone, you know, an iron ingot, something like that, it's not going to work because the filter is now primed so that the only thing it will accept is an ominous banner. That will get filtered through, and it opens the door permanently, allowing Jimmy to walk in and out and discover what exactly it is the pillagers have been doing here. But then that door will stay open permanently. There is a button on the inside just in case he gets trapped in here. Don't want him to have to break the door. But it is a pretty straightforward item filter. I've got an ominous banner in here, and an ominous banner is just going to hop through the hopper and end up in the barrel down there. And any other items he throws in are going to go to this barrel here because they won't be able to pass through the item filter. So with that all reset, the only thing we have left to do inside of there is a little bit more decoration. In fact, this whole thing is pretty much good to go, except we have to move the pillagers in. Oh, and one other really fun thing about the lift mechanism here, it isn't triggered by the note block in the same way that the barrel up there triggers it. You'll notice there is no observer pointing into this note block, but the cool thing is, once we step onto the lift, we will have to wait for a couple of seconds for our footsteps to die down. We punch that note block, and the lift mechanism activates. That's actually a skulk sensor, which is filtering for the vibration frequency of a note block. When it detects a note block being played nearby, it will activate the mechanism, but only if it isn't already hearing some other sounds. So potentially, if Jimmy isn't standing perfectly still, the lift won't work for him. So there's potentially some fun to be had there in terms of him getting stuck down there in the mines until he figures out how the lift works. He has to be quiet when he activates it. But here is the entrance still left to be decorated, and over there is the pillager outpost where I just got those two ominous banners, and we will be back for more. So as you can probably see and hear, pillager capturing is going very well. I've got, I think, 6 or 8 of them so far. I haven't, oh no, 7. I have one that's like back there because I didn't build the cell for him in time and I had to improvise. But I've got 7 of the pillagers all trapped in here, and they're all name tagged Tumbletown Bandit. I like the fact that these guys identify with Tumbletown, so they're all the Tumbletown Bandits. But I have 2 more name tags, 2 more minecarts, and 2 more cells that I need to occupy, and those are going to be the bosses. Over here at the pillager watchtower, where I have all of the rails and stuff leading up to, I need to make sure I can get a pillager captain who's got a banner, and I don't think that these banners get passed between pillagers in the same way that they do during a raid. So I'm really hoping that we can track down a couple of pillager captains, lure them out to the edges of the outpost here, and get them trapped in minecarts the way I've been doing with the other pillagers. So this is probably going to be a matter of flying away and respawning the pillagers in this area a few times, just so we can guarantee that the one with the banner is going to A, see us, and B, be in the right place, somewhere sort of over here. But maybe we can lure that one that had the banner over here and maybe get rid of some of the underlings. I mostly don't want them to take too much damage in the process, and I don't really want to go and get Bad Omen and have to run off and find a cow so that I can dispel the effect. But as you can see, there are a lot of pillagers around. That one with the banner is pretty close though, so I'm wondering if maybe, yep, once you attack one of them, pillagers' range in which they can detect you seems to increase quite dramatically. So it's pretty clear that those guys are onto me, and now we can try and isolate their leader. This guy is floating up to my rail line. I'm going to see if I can get him in a minecart first so I can name tag him before I send him off over there, because it's far enough away that he might end up despawning. And if I send the minecart around the loop this way, it loops here. We stop it using one of the levers, and then the guy can be sent back around the minecart the opposite way. Yes, there we go. Okay, we got him. So we're going to stop him using this lever. After a couple of circuits, he should come to a stop. We can name tag him the boss, and we can send him off on his way, and he'll end up in one of the cells over there. Just going to follow him over here to make sure that nothing goes wrong. I have had to put a couple of powered rails under there because the carts kept slowing down, but there we go. He slots in right at the end of the line, and you can see that banner, can't you? All right, let's link up this last cell. Let's get another pillager with a banner in here. I want to have 2 bosses just to make it a little bit easier for Jimmy to get hold of one of these banners. And there's another pillager captain over here on this side. Let's see if we can lure him over here. He's up there on the hill right now, but I have a lot of them on me, so I'm going to try and take out these guys first, and it seems like the pillager captain has ordered his friends over here as well. I am getting my fair share of pillager heads and crossbows from this excursion, which I think is honestly a good thing. I think we might be able to do some extra decoration down there in the mineshaft with those. But here comes our second captain. He should get in the minecart. Yes, there we go. As soon as they hit the corners, that's usually when it happens. And we can name tag this guy the boss, activate that lever, and send him off on his way. Let's take care of the underlings as well. And it looks like that guy is all good to go. And at this point, Jimmy is back from his trip to America, so I'm having to do all of this after hours on the server when things are a little bit quieter. Hopefully he doesn't end up logging in while I'm still taking down some of the materials here. And our 2 bosses are chilling over here. Very, very nice. Now, I do have a tunnel that's dug directly down into the drying room where all of the clay is. The idea is that the pillagers will come all the way down here, and activator rail is going to kick them off the minecart, and they'll be able to hop in here and free roam from that point onwards. So I really need to make sure that all of the set dressing is done before I spend too much time down here. I don't want to risk the pillagers pathfinding out over this minecart rail. If they get aggroed on me, there's a potential for them to do that. But I definitely want to get a few more details in here. I want to get some beams and props, some mineshaft style decorations. I'm going to put a few of these rails here now that I brought a few of them with me. We can maybe put some more set dressing ideas around here, some cauldrons or something so that they can like have something to wash their hands or something. I don't know. We can throw some crossbows in here as well, a couple with loaded arrows, a couple without. I actually want to start cooking some of the clay that we've got here, and some of that can be in the form of clay balls, or we can form it up into terracotta. I kind of like the idea that they're also trading bricks from this. But for that, we'll need our chest minecarts to go in here. We'll need to throw some fuel in there as well. We got to cook some of this stuff. I like the fact that they would have some output here on the other side. And if Jimmy wants to know the mechanics that are at work here, he can look down through the campfires, and because they have a transparent base in this texture pack, he can see that there is pointed dripstone below, and that might give him a clue as to how this works if he wants to reproduce this setup somewhere more convenient. Overall, I think this has been really fun to set up. Just a couple more touches are going to make it perfect. Okay, we're almost done here, and I wanted to show you something because I have resolved the problem of Jimmy not stepping into this area before opening the barrel. I thought the solution with the stairs was a little bit clunky and potentially not even all that reliable. So what I've done instead is make this whole elevator thing a little bit more pillager focused. So when he opens the barrel now, instead of immediately activating the elevator, what happens is he'll notice a pillager head, a couple of crossbows, and if he's observant and listening out for anything, he will hear that a block over here on this side ends up shifting to one side. And it does that anytime the observer behind the barrel detects a change, so it'll do it when the barrel opens, but also when the barrel closes. So if he's too busy looking through the loot for the first time and this opens and shuts on the left-hand side, once he closes the barrel GUI, it'll open again. It'll basically give him a little bit longer to investigate whatever this is. And as you can see from there is a target block back here. It's not too far away because the whole point is that you're supposed to shoot it more or less at point-blank range. And if Jimmy isn't carrying a bow at the time, there's a couple of loaded crossbows in here he can use to shoot the target. When he does that, that activates the lift, and that is not really visible. It's not really something you could shoot from out there in the corridors, so he basically has to be standing inside the lift for it to activate. And I think as a solution, that's fairly elegant. Now, when we come out in here, there's a couple more details in here. There's a couple more supporting beams and props. There's a little bit of wooden detail, and I'm still going to load in a few more hopper minecarts or chest minecarts around here just to give a little bit more of a, you know, pillager mining outpost vibe, even though that's not strictly speaking what this is. There's a little bit more detail inside this room as well, so there's a few more details there, a couple of workbenches, a couple of loose objects, that kind of thing. I've also shaped the outside of this doorway a little bit more just to make sure that it felt like it was supported and that the ceiling was being propped up there. Likewise, over here, we've got a couple of those leading on into this factory floor area where, once again, the clay is pretty much cooked. Although I do have a couple of loose blocks of mud that are separate from the platforms, kind of to give the impression of the fact that mud has been stored around here and is waiting to be put into place. I've decided I'm going to load up the furnaces with charcoal. It kind of makes the most sense. It feels like the pillagers would have access to charcoal. It still feels a little bit primitive at the same time. And before we let the pillagers in through this hole in the ceiling, I think the only thing that's left to do really is get those chest minecarts in place over here at the auto furnace and out there in the corridors. Oh yes, the other thing I want to do is get the lectern established in here so we can at least have some instructions for how to use this machine. So we'll have a lectern in here over to one side. We might even put it in part of the shelves over here to see if it kind of like blends a little better there. But this book and quill is going to have a decent set of instructions for how to operate the machine and maybe instructions for the people in the other room as well. Okay, so the Tumbletown Bandits Terracotta factory now has an instruction manual which says, Step 1, place the dirt against the piston. Don't spam it. The machine don't like when you spam it. If you just hold down right click, it starts to spit out water bottles and it becomes a lot less consistent, so it's just about doing it at a pace the machine can handle. Step 2, shovel up all the mud and use the minecart to send mud to the boys in the next room. The boys will place the mud on the drying racks and turn it into clay. Once the clay is dry, ball it up and smelt it for bricks, or shape it back into a block and smelt for terracotta. And finally, use the lift to bring the terracotta back upstairs, kind of implying that that's the only way out of this place. And hopefully Jimmy will get to read this and decide whether he's going to use the factory for himself, or if he's going to maybe copy the technology and use it elsewhere. Or he might just ignore this entirely and just think that's some weird thing that the pillagers were doing. But I like the idea of introducing him to the whole renewable terracotta idea, and I think it's about time that we get these pillagers down here. So I'm going to make sure I use the lift to head back up, since the lift needs to be reset in its original position. Just got to wait for a couple of seconds and then hit that note block. And I think we're going to stick a couple of the pillagers in this little alcove here, so he gets a bit of a surprise when he rounds this corner. But the majority of them are going to be downstairs in the drying room, and it looks like night is falling, or maybe the sun is rising over there. It looks like, yeah, sunrise, so perfect. We're going to grab our box of rails, we're going to grab the levers that I seem to still have on me, and we're going to get all of these pillagers down into the depths of the terracotta smelting room, starting with the 2 boss pillagers and then moving on to the rest of the crew until the last 2 get set up nearer the entrance. And I'm not entirely certain what's going to happen when the pillager hits this activator rail, which should kick them out of the minecart. I'm not certain if the game is going to put them on top of the trapdoors here, or if it's just going to drop them off in this space, but putting the slabs here should make sure that they at least don't appear right there on the neighboring rail and start to climb up this way. Basically, we're making sure that the pillager can't escape back up the tunnel that they come down. But we had an easy enough time capturing this lot that I'm not that worried about it if we lose one of them. The worst thing that happens is I have to go and buy another name tag, and that's not too much of a hassle. But there's a powered rail in here now, so I should just be able to pull this lever. The pillager captain will be sent off on his way, and let's follow him down there and see how he fares. So once he hits the bottom of this ramp, he should be ejected from the cart, and it looks like, yep, no, he just fell down the trapdoor. Perfect. Now let's make sure that he's alive. It sounds like he is down there, okay, and then we get to collect the minecart from here. Perfect, that could not have gone better. I can even use the free cam mod to take a look at where he's at. Yep, he's already over here on top of the clay, inspecting the goods. Well, that is good, and I hope he stays over there instead of walking across these rails. Let's cross our fingers that that works out, but it should be safe enough to send the rest of the pillagers down here too. Our second captain is down here. He hasn't walked willingly onto the trapdoors like the other one did, but I'm hoping that once we're down here and he maybe notices that I'm around, he's going to try and pathfind towards me, and that'll drop him down into the trapdoors as well. There we go. And now he's in here, but oh, where's the other one gone? Oh, dang it. Okay, worst case scenario. Looks like the other boss has made his way out here. So we're going to have to lure him back in and then come up with something a little bit more robust than these minecart rails to block their pathfinding. Okay, I think I've seen what they're doing. They're actually walking up onto that log, and that's allowing them to cross the minecart rail. Because look at this guy right now. He doesn't want to get back into the room because the minecart rail is there, and that's preventing him from pathfinding towards me. If we break the minecart rail here, that should be fine. He should be able to walk down the room towards us, and I can just block his crossbow shots in the meantime. But basically, we need to eliminate the blocks from around here to make sure that they can't step up onto the minecart rail, and then we should be able to place a couple of blocks around here to get this first guy back up in here. That should give him a way to pathfind up towards me. We'll break the rail here one more time to allow him to cross into the room. All right, both the captains are in here. One of them just shot the other one, but that's fine. We can block them off in here, and now do they try and pathfind towards me? It doesn't look like they do. So we can still pop a couple of logs around here for set dressing, but the most important thing is that they're not adjacent to the minecart rails, so that the pillagers can't walk up onto the block and then drop down onto the rail, at which point their pathfinding is totally fine. But yeah, these two seem to be more at home in here now, so I'm going to try and make my escape. And at this point, yes, they don't seem to want to cross those rails. Well, I've softened the pillager captains up a little bit. They seem like they've maybe taken a couple of hits now, so they won't be quite as tough for Jimmy to take down. Alright, having resolved that problem, I think it's safe to get the rest of the pillagers down in here now. We'll keep periodically checking on those two, but I think as long as they're in there, this whole thing should go according to plan. Alright, back in free cam mode, we've got a pretty decent pillager patrol in here, and thankfully none of them seem to have tried to pathfind out over the rails. I think the only possible scenario in which one of them gets out is if they're standing by the rails and then another one pathfinds over and just like nudges them onto the rails, which has a fairly slim chance of happening, especially once I'm out of here and I've unloaded the chunks. So I'm going to cover my tracks at this point. I'm going to fill in the rest of this area so that it doesn't look like we've just airdropped a bunch of pillagers into the room. We're going to redirect our remaining two pillagers into that alcove at the entrance to the mine. The final piece of the puzzle is going to be getting other people involved and setting up a terracotta shop in Jimmy's mesa that other people are going to come and buy from, and then ask him, oh hey, I saw you set up a terracotta shop, is it okay if I show that on camera, or something like that. And then he'll be forced to log in, investigate, and figure out where this location is. And I need to leave him a little breadcrumb trail to follow, but I think somewhere central in Tumbletown, somewhere near the gunpowder shop, seems like a good place for us to set up our terracotta pop-up shop. So let's pick a spot and let's get to it. So here it is, Tumbletown Terracotta, a totally legit business. I like that. And I'm actually gonna make the first purchase myself here. I had a bit of extra goodies in my bundle for throwing in there for Jimmy's little experience, but I like the idea of somebody already having bought this, and just in case nobody else can hop online, I'm gonna put 2 diamonds in there and take a stack of terracotta. This is all my terracotta, by the way, that I got from a different mesa, but we might as well act as though it's Jimmy's. But if other people can get online and check this out, then that's good, and it'll encourage Jimmy to potentially investigate what's going on here. Otherwise, he's just going to log in and see this balloon and think immediately that something's up. But either way, the breadcrumb trail has been laid. I've said if you need more terracotta, if we're out of terracotta, you can go there and ask for the boss, and obviously that sets up the whole thing with the pillager captains and everything. I'm going to head over and load up the chest minecarts with a little bit of loot, but aside from that, this experience is going pretty well so far, and hopefully we'll get to see Jimmy's reaction to it very soon. Unbelievable. So Jimmy's video about this is now out, but he missed more than half of it. Like he saw the balloon, he saw the Tumbletown Terracotta thing, he found this place thanks to me leaving the coordinates. And then he went ahead and just blew this up. He blew it up along with the 2 pillagers who were stationed in the alcove around here, and he's clearly just left behind all of this wood and stuff. He blew this up, and then he went down here, opened the barrel, and I think the barrel thing was just too subtle. I should have had the target block appear there and not there, but again, I didn't want him to shoot it from the corner, and yet, when that block opened, he wasn't paying attention, he didn't see it. He was just more interested in the stuff that was in the barrel. I honestly should have kept the floor of this moving. I didn't want to have a situation where he just jumped down here or something. I wanted him to be standing on there when it started moving. So I'm going to have to do some damage control here. I need him to see what's going on down here, because the rest of this is completely untouched. And some of the pillagers, I really hate the fact that they've managed to wander out of here. Hopefully these ones are going to stick around, but the majority of the pillagers have now just gotten into this pit, which is fine. They're down here. Maybe it's an ambush. We've got a minecart over here to kind of imagine that the sheriff is going to check the minecart and then all of these guys open fire. At least one of those has the boss flag, at least, but man, I really wish that more of them had stayed in here. I don't know what is causing them to track over the minecart rails. They normally don't do that. But now some of this has been destroyed, I kind of want to repair it a little bit. I kind of want to make it look like things have been patched up in between Jimmy coming here and the next time he visits. So I'm going to lay in a little bit of stripped wood, kind of throw in some stuff that feels like it's sort of been patchworked together here. I'm going to add some spruce fence to this as a kind of like, this area is cordoned off so that maybe we can add a sign on it being like danger, not safe. And this section here can all be made out of like cobblestone and stuff as though it's fallen in after the explosion that Jimmy triggered here. And we'll put some fences around that as well, as though they've tried to contain this rock slide that's happened. And just to really egg Jimmy on to investigate this further, we're going to put some more signs outside of the entrance here. Let's go with property of Tumbletown boys. No sheriffs allowed. Sheriff keep out. There we go. That'll pretty much convince him, and I've left a gap in between here so he doesn't have to even break anything. He can just walk on down into this place. But I'm fairly certain that he's going to investigate a little more if he feels like the guys are still using this place as a hideout. And yeah, I wanted to do an interesting entrance kind of thing here, but I decided to just leave it as a cave. I feel like it feels more legit if it's just a cave, and they've kind of thrown together these ramshackle gates and stuff like that to try and keep stuff out. I kind of like that as an idea. I'm going to add in one more thing that I didn't add the first time around because I totally forgot to stash all of this stuff further down, and honestly, once I'd filled it with pillagers, I figured, hey, that's probably going to be a bit of a hassle. So instead, we've got Vinny's secret stash down here, and this is going to be another hint at the target blocks having some importance in here, because I'm going to place a target block over here in this ravine, kind of in the background, but maybe like slightly lit by the light sources that I've had to place around here to prevent too many mobs from spawning. And the idea is that when the sheriff shoots a target block over there, it's going to withdraw a piston for a split second, and that's going to reveal this, and maybe we'll have it close off again after a short amount of time, a pulse extender or something like that. But I want it to be out there in the shadows so he only notices if he looks through some of the, you know, the open areas of these shelves. So we'll have the target block, I want to say back here. I want it to be a relatively difficult shot, but something that he can definitely make from over there behind those shelves. Also gives me plenty of opportunity to hide redstone down here. That will activate, right? Yeah, that'll be fine. And we'll need to put a repeater in here pretty early, otherwise any hit that's not towards the center is not going to activate the rest of this circuit. And I don't want Jimmy to think that the target block doesn't do anything, because, you know, he's already made that mistake once or twice. And with a repeater into this block here, all we should need to do is put a redstone torch on there. We'll have the piston immediately following that, so that it's already pushing a block out here, and then we'll fill that in. So now, if I cover that up and we shoot the target block from a distance, yeah, that opens up, and it opens up just in time for him to see there's something down here. Then he needs to shoot this again, time walking over to this, and then he'll be able to access Vinny's secret stash. So not the hardest puzzle in the world, but one that requires a little bit of timing. By now, we know that the sheriff isn't all that quick on the uptake. Let's see if he's at least quick on the draw. And I think that's where we're going to wrap this project up. Let's see if Jimmy manages to take the bait a second time around. Thank you folks so much for watching this Behind the Lore episode of Empire's SMP. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.